And welcome. Johnny and you are first ever. Changed my setup. We're here today. Hopefully, you can hear me well enough. You can see me well enough. You'll be able to see my screen well enough. We're going to code. We're going to talk. And most of all, we're going to have fun. And I'll try to not look at the stream second monitor. I will be looking at the. But I'll do my best. Useful and entertaining. I wish I could look at the camera instead of the prompter here. Stream is going correctly, but it is. Cool. So, speaking of setting up live stream, hey, our first ever chat in YouTube Live. Amazing. So, I was trying to set this up, and the landscape has changed so much. You can add so many overlays, you can add so many notifications. People send chat messages, when they interact with you, when they sub. It's insane. And what I found is that there are so many tools out there, or quite a few tools. And I'm sure they've done a great job. I'm not saying I would have done a better job. There is lots of room for improvement. So if you know Figma, the design tool, it's not at that level. Setting up these overlays can have a lot of tweaking being done to it for great value. So here's your free startup idea. Try to create a tweets and YouTube overlay app. Because a lot of these things, a lot of the overlays that you're seeing in my screen here, like the thumbnail for this stream and the chat, they are actually just browser-based apps. I have my OBS software pointing to a browser window essentially, and it overlays it on the screen, which is amazingly cool, and can make one of those apps. People will find it useful. Great, a big streamer, paying a lot of those things. I would create, I think, a Pomodoro app, which is like the little timer which you set for your 25 minutes work and 5-minute break. And that'd be fun to overlay here and remind myself to take breaks, engage with the chat. Like you, Axe. I had a colleague named Axe. And he didn't mind the abbreviation to Axe here. Of course. So I'm not sure if int Axe is good enough for you. Apologies if not correctly. In any case, that's not the app that we're gonna make. I haven't prepared for this. I've prepared a little bit to make a currency. There are quite a few apps, especially if you are in the fintech sector, that have you asking for money or donating money or having transactions. And they often have a currency. I want this amount of money. I want to donate this amount of money. And because this is a key feature of those apps, they try to make that input amazing. They try to make it fancy, which is surprisingly hard to make it readable. They don't often do the prefix of the currency. They don't often do the commas for readability. So 1.000, comma 000.00. Well, 1 million. It's easier to say, and the screen reader would be able to say it quite easily. But when you see it, you're like, how many zeros is that? Is it 6? Is it 7? How much am I getting here? And let's switch over to see an example with Stripe. Is another thing that people have sometimes asked me about. How do we integrate with Stripe in Next.js or Svelte or whichever app you want? Stripe is the go-to, I'd say, startup for this. Hello. Go Cardless, of course, is also doing quite a lot of work there in a more business-to-business type of thing. But in any case, if you are interested in Stripe integration, maybe this will be the first step to episodes or some series that are going to be about that sort of thing. And I was looking at the Humble bundle, even though I'm not a PC gamer anymore. I handed in my true gamer card many years ago, and now I own it. But maybe with the Stream Deck, if got that, I don't. You'd be on the humble button checking, what can I get nowadays? And you see that they are having this currency input. They are having these values for you to hit. But this is kind of cheating by having the euro sign be outside of the input. And it will also not put the commas for you. So maybe you want to give them £1,000, but probably not. Maybe if you could see the comma sign, which you can't even add here, then you'd know that it will be a bit less likely that you'd give Humble Bundle a magnitude more money that you'd want. In either case, both of these are not. Here I'm just for fun. If I saw anything, it's fun or figure things out. I've talked a lot about Tailwind as well. Tailwind UI, not a free tool, but I do have it because sometimes it makes my life easier, even if I don't paste the code. It's good for inspiration. And you'll see that here too, they have the $sign included in the input. And even though you can add commas and dots, you can actually add anything, so they're not doing any validation there. And no matter what, they're not gonna format this for you. So they're just gonna let this be a... And today, we'll try something more. We'll try to slightly better. Hopefully. So what are we gonna do today? A fancier formatted input, which I had to do in React maybe a month ago. And I haven't actually done in Svelte or thoroughly prepared for this. So this is the imposter syndrome cure. If you're watching my edited videos and are like, wow, this so fast when he codes, it's insane. Well, a lot of it is editing. And if not a lot of it, most of it is preparation. I do research the videos, I do dry run before of what I'm actually board, and then I do this. So it's probably faster than real life, and definitely faster than how I code in real life while I'm talking, streaming, and explaining myself. So if you're not coding as fast as I am, that's no problem. That's often not real life, but even if today you're not coding as fast as I, that's also not a ability to code fast is cool for party tricks and maybe interviews, looks cool, but in practice, it doesn't have any real benefit. Because it may save you like time in the minutes per day, but there are other more architectural, other things test well that can save you days. Or take your time, code well, don't feel stressed. You're going faster or I am today. But indeed, this will be your chance to see more of my screen, which a lot of people often ask. Please let us focus on the code you're actually writing. So today, we are in this with Svelte demo app that demos, use, you want to call them. We keep adding features to it, and one day we'll have. Don't know exactly how. Don't really want to. I don't know. We'll see. But today we will add a currency in here, and I haven't done much. This whole app, you can see in previous episodes, it does have quite a lot, but we go over all of the things that it here implemented. Really, the bulk of which is the authentication I've ever done. But for today, I didn't do much other than create a hidden route that nothing links to. And I called it tips, which gets into this Svelte route. Definitely called it tips because I can see it here. And it shows this little heading of the page. It has the header or the navbar collab because of the layout component created in a previous episode. It just has this helper text, and then it has this form. We won't really go into what does enhanced form do again, and Svelte forms and all of that. What we will do is implement this fancy button that nothing. The other thing I did was bring in testing library Svelte here, which you may remember from the previous video, which was all about formatting currency. Well, no, it was all about setting up vtest in my example. Really, so finally happening. And my second monitor keeps hiding the blade. Hope you're having fun. So I do have the first test. Some people think tests are boring. Often when I do the videos, I do not show myself write tests for them in real life to write tests. And most of the time I write the test first. Especially when doing UI, there is nothing more satisfying as having something tested first, and then it's green, and then you see it on the side on the screen. You haven't even tried it out. Right? And it actually looks and works as you expected just from the test. That's the flex lifetime. Do that in an interview. But kidding aside, today we will be trying to write the test first. So let me know if you appreciate that or not. So testing library, all it's doing here is rendering our pretty barren fancy currency component. And the first thing we want for any input is a label. You can get around having labels or having hidden labels, but I'd say for accessibility, play it safe as you have strict guidelines. They actually sensible, make sure that label there. So the render method from a testing library returns all the handy selectors you can use, and the one we'll want for our input component to find the label will be the get by label text. And the label that we want, I suggest anything. What are we gonna call the input today? Let's say fact. Get by label text comments to be in the document. The thing you often see pop up, and I hastily tab into it, it's GitHub Copilot. It is very handy and my instinct now. But I'd say it doesn't have it. Sometimes don't want to do learning, and it's not. Right, so if we save this, I have the test here on the terminal watch mode, and we can indeed not find a label. How much? So let's implement thing here. Could be label. And now, depends on how we want to imagine this being. If we wanted to create this fancy currency component to be versatile, I guess, if we are planning to use it in other places, we may want to take the label as a prop. Pass to that I want label to be. But for now, I'm only going to use it in this one place. So I'm going to leave it at that. And for our test to pass, we need a rudimentary input component as well, and get the element that's label. And I'm doing this cheeky trick that has been advised to me of nesting the inputs inside the label, which often gets you like the focus for free without you having to do a label for the ID of the other component, then an input. And this indeed makes the test pass. So next up, We want the user to be able to type stuff into this. And the easy way to do stuff, user interactions, is a library called user event. Let's import user event from library user event. And since version 14, you have to initialize this at the start of the test. You actually need to call user event to get the user with your configuration options, setup options. And if we do that, and we turn our method into sync method, in a sync, but I'm thinking a wait here, we can user type available text. So this is quite good from GitHub Copilot as well. But let's say we just want them to type and this should work. And then we can have an expectation of what the display value would be after all of this. So if we expect that at that point, the display value should be example of a there. Want this to be in the document. Oh no, example of me. I got the get by display value from the testing library export. You have to pass the document in it. That's the first argument. So anyway, if you destructure it from here, you don't need to pass the contain element. So this should still work. We haven't broken. Can even get this at. But now, how can we actually break this in order to implement what we really want? Fancy currency. Well, I think about this more readable, more pleasant to look at. Let's add a place. Will work. Let's say that we want our input to have a placeholder of maybe 5 pounds. And that's still implement a placeholder of pounds. That allow us to usually this thing bit more padding at the top than on the other way. Let's look. Span. This is my feature. Renaming elements. Not working. So VS Code actually has a native way to do this, to be able to change the elements. It doesn't work with React, but sometimes when you try to rearrange things, it will do something. Including maybe that's prettier as well, working kind of weirdly here. I don't find the way they are breaking the label. That is fine, but hey, it is what it is. So this looks All right. Our problem is that I type in something, great. Then when I'm out of it, I want to see this as formatted nicely. I want to see that it is indeed 1 million. It is hard to figure out if we're talking millions here. 12 million apparently is what in the and you can add the currency here, although ever in an app numbers, but maybe it's an app that panel point. Something when you're working with doesn't need to be currency. I do think being able to have the commas for utility when it starts number, I do think that's a legit making this up. I found. How do we do it? And most importantly, how do we test it? The only way I can think of for now, so let me know if there is a better way or a you think about suddenly bids to keys, you're like, oh my god, Sonny, I got it. Then you can be like, goodness, back to the comment section here. But the way I'm gonna do it after I refactor here to get reference to this input. They get a reference to this input. I see that we're using get label text twice. Maybe we shouldn't. So I'm gonna extract this variable. I expect the input to be here. Then I want to type into that input. And I expect that this with the display value of this. Data input. And the way I'm thinking to force something nicely formatted, I'm thinking should be for the updated input there is data that's formatted value, which maybe screen readers will read, but we'll definitely be using to show this visually nicely. So what I want is for the updated input attribute data formatted value, and I want that formatted value to be unsigned this. I think this will be able to capture that if I focus in the input and I get out with this value, the moment I focus out, this will change this. Fair enough? How will we do that? Well, if we have a reference, the value, we can format. If we make this a control element, usually I would avoid like it be lazy and break it. Maybe that be the way to go. But just to confirm that I want to introduce a data formatted value. Say that test. And the test will pass. So maybe this allows us to count with. Method. Because I'm not actually sure where the data format should be. So I do think it would be dangerous to change the actual value at the moment the user is very likely that your backend will actually and it won't be what the user typed either. So I do think having a separate value for the makes more sense, less likely this. And the way I'm hoping to add a formatted value, pseudo element. I would want a pseudo element to take this value and actually put it in front of the input value here. This or element or something. The moment we focus out, I want to actually show this formatted value. Possible. I do know that Tailwind has a few things about adding stuff to pseudo elements. So if we do there, we add a class for content and class random value. Am I making things? Maybe it is that input elements don't have can't have pseudo elements. Edit. Relative. All right, so this worked here. It work in the. I think the answer is no. I have to remember in. Maybe we can. Hmm. Great. But so this does mean we'll want to encase this into something and have that at a formatted value, which sadly means that we'll need to test this a different way. But it happened. Great. And let's pass the data formatted here. And as of So I will check out these access warnings afterward. Label to work. So we do successfully have a content here, but we want to use the data formatted value here, the data attribute here. I guess we could hard code this, but in the near future, make this. So how do we do that? As we saw in Tailwind, you can actually pass the attribute selector here. And then you can reference a value that's stored into any attribute. So if we do attribute of data formatted value, this will show the font. And what we want now is to put this on top of this. How we would do that? Seems that this relative, it would seem that it's about as big as we wanted. We pass these other classes this thing, stuff still correct. Well, somewhat correct. It seems that the padding we still need here. Maybe we can add like around it. And what we may want now to make or before element be absolutely positioned, and maybe have a left. The same padding can be 2, and the top is going to be 1. And maybe now you can kind of see what I'm going with here. But the point is that we only want this to appear when the element is not focused. So if it's focused, I want our before element to be hidden. Not quite. Of course, we're not focusing on the in element. Maybe the other way to do it would be to have the input. Let me move this. Warning, because it's too many underscores for me. How do I get to the Svelte namespace? The rescue. Anybody? one. There, JSX accessibility. Is it Svelte? Anyway, this is not the let's debug ESLint episode. Gonna for too long. Try to bring it in and out a couple times. And if not, move on. Maybe that's a reason to use a separate label for this. And then move on. Maybe. All right, so this goes, wait a minute. Haven't, yeah, because it is label. So let's try to save this in case it's an actual. So we want this class attributes to be on the label. No span anymore. Label or our amount. And our input name is amount and ID amount 2. Here, I haven't broken. And we can focus on making that formatted when I have. Should we also don't get out of too easily here. But in any case, it feels the placeholder is also nicely for and should be tailwind that to allow click functions. This may be it. No, it's still good. Has to be. Has to be. So that's in a different. Of course, it's the before element that we want it to have no. Yeah, of course. Should do element. Hey Juan, I live in Barcelona now. Here, Tony is mine. Wow. Cool. So all of this support we did manage here and focus. This still looks quite silly, but we actually want is for when focused before to disappear. But it doesn't seem that we can target the focus of the input while we're outside of the input. If we could use a before pseudo element in the input, all of this wouldn't have been, but we cannot. So how are we going to do that? We may try to hit and give like a set index here. And say that when this, so you can see the moment I give it a higher send index than the placeholder appears. Force the element. So if we only do that focus in, but if it will appear, force the element, give it some setting, appears. Then when you focus, it disappears. Unfocus again, it will reappear. We're messing with that ability to be able to value and then get out and see. But our problem is indeed that this value does not correspond to the reality of what I've put in the and this also don't. It's not focused. We want it to not. Wonder what's going to happen. Make it. We'll figure it out one step at a time. The thing but of course, when it's oh, what am I saying? Text transparent that we want only when it's not. This work and that placeholder value anymore. But how can we make not a value there? We'll see. First, let's unbreak our test. Let's just say that we want. Is there a get by attribute? Must be. Oh well, there are some cases. That attribute, yes, we want to specifically, we only use this span, have that. Ooh, thanks for that, the sound. Thankfully, it took care of itself. So let's do a data test ID off value here. And expect that we will have a formatted value element. Instead of doing this. And it does exist, and we expect the formatted value to be whatever it was before, which was # lit 00. Sorry, to have attribute. So I definitely should have undone and pasted this back in. Because I wouldn't have missed the comma either. Or whatever else. Well, comma now. Listen to the comma. It happens. Cool. So we have this thing that has this attribute, but we've only hard-coded it in. And we can have our user here, because we do want to clear the input. And then we can do all of this again. And say, user has cleared the updated input. Then they type in lit, but with a comma somewhere else. And then the updated formatted value should be this. It will not work. And since I'm only using the updated input there, I'm not. Take it back. Forget this ever happened. So at this point where we actually want this to be dynamic, we need to introduce some state. And I believe the way that you do that in Svelte is that you can introduce a variable. Maybe it can start as null, but it's going to be either null or. And then we'll say that the value is the value variable, which will be auto-formatted to this. And this should still work, and this becomes a control input, but now we have a reference to this value to use elsewhere, which means that if you remember from last episode of test, we created a format currency method, which I changed slightly for this to always format it so it has two trailing, two insignificant digits. I think they're called significant to the left, right? But that detail is did. So what I want is to pass the value that we have, which is a number like 1000, to our format currency method. And this should result in the want. But this should be a number. And maybe it's a float. So let's parse float this. Ah, interesting. That is problem. Problem was that null. Interesting. And then we get this lovely nan. So derived value. How do you do them? It's a weird syntax. I may need to actually look it up. But I think we can say that the formatted value not null, then it's this. or else currencies. And then we can use this as a data attribute, and maybe this will work. It is a live video indeed. The recorded videos are a rabbit hole. But the chat does disappear from my screen, sadly. And that's why it's a bit of a... I try to... So, seems we're getting somewhere. But the problem may be that I need to refer the derived values Svelte. Nope. Activity. Oh, that's correct. So if the value is not null, then I pass it to this. Then I parse float. Interesting. Values null. And the value is truthy. There is a value format currency. I was going to say that the formatted value is this will show up. So there must be a problem with my format currency method. It does return a string. My tests do indeed say that the data formatted value remains null no matter what happens. Quite interesting. Those have the effect that kinda want, and that it doesn't show up as anything and you can see the placeholder. Then when it's something, seems like not exactly what I want. It always remains null. Why? This should be reactive. I do use TypeScript or JavaScript and Node on the backend. I did used to use PHP. Nowadays, I do go for JavaScript backend. I wouldn't go for PHP if I can run the language. Very often, companies have backends. Ruby, Rails is super popular still. Maybe for something like more new age, but still kind of old. Python, whenever it comes to machine learning, then it's almost always going to be Python. Yeah, so binding may be the problem here, but I was expecting that this would magically do it for me. Oh no. Let's see. Theme. Monokai theme. Today. Oh, Dracula. All right, so Svelte basics. How do you bind values? We may need to do the .bind thingy. Apologies for the mic. I can see it going yellow sometimes, but I don't know why. Too much. So I thought this. Let's. Oh, yay. Cool. So this is gonna work so long as we go back to parsing floats and not integers. Indeed. Classic trick of unplugging and plugging the microphone back in. And thanks, Thierke, for the prompt to find the value there. Was definitely it. Give me one moment to go into the OBS software for streaming and edit filters that I have for the mic. And maybe have like a less aggressive noise gate. Hopefully this doesn't result into tons of noise coming your way, but it will also not disappear every so often. Thanks. So the Dracula theme, or Darkula theme, it does come from my PHP Storm days. I did reference PHP before. So somehow this is starting to look kind of decent. How did we manage to do that? To recap, we made this control input. We had to read the chat and reference the Svelte docs of how do you actually do that. It does do some shorthand for us because we named the value, but not as much shorthanding as I expected. So you do need that bind prefix to actually bind the value there. Whoops. And what we're doing, we're putting the input inside a span in order to have a pseudo element take over whenever we're not focused on the input. And that pseudo element is the one where it's using a data attribute to format our value here into the nice prefixed with commas value that we all wanted all along. And this is essentially what I wanted to show today. There are some bonuses to bring this a bit further. A question may be, why don't we have a number input? And the answer is that, well, it will give us those nice keyboard shortcuts where you can actually press up and down and increment or decrement, and you can even set your step value there, which we may want that. But it will also add some kind of ugly looking arrows on the side, which may be fine for you. For some reason, they're not appearing. So maybe this is the time to figure out what we're doing wrong with the padding here to make this clip out. Interesting. We will debug it later. Another, if you do get those annoying little arrows, maybe if you're on a different device, there they are. So if you don't like those, so for example, if you have a design that has like a plus and minus dedicated button on the right, or if you're a bit like the Humble Bundle page that we showed previously, where you don't want to have the user play with these buttons, but you have your own buttons for the user to click on, There are classes for that, and the classes are actually outer spin button and inner spin button, and they're only on WebKit. So if we add these classes, so maybe let's add them now. Let's say that for our input, we want an appearance. I was thinking, what do I use for the HTML autocomplete here? And most of it is the GitHub Copilot thing that I've mentioned before. Whoa, too many inputs there. Too many curlies. So now if I focus, you see that we've lost the plus and minus thingies on the right here, because maybe we don't want them. But if you do want them, if you do want to trust whatever the Chrome team is doing for the plus and minuses, no need to bother with that class. Also, because these are special prefixed browser only or engine only classes, Tailwind does not have a class for them. It doesn't have a class to remove them, at least not yet. I think their thinking is that they don't want things to fix specific browsers, because maybe they may change. And auto prefixer as well will not allow you to do this, as you may have seen in many other things that could use prefixes. In any case, there is no handy Tailwind class to make this happen. So if you do not like the arrows, you have to remember this. Maybe search for outer spin button, and you'll get the rest by Google. Maybe we'll remove them just to have them in version control. You can check out my GitHub. You can see it in the channel, /jmacripis, or jmacripis is my handle in many places. Find me there. And there is the with Svelte repo, which I try to fill with all of the things that we are doing in the video, so you can reference them later. And for the recorded videos, no matter how much time I spend, I don't always get things right. And the best way to find out what the true solution things are is to be wrong on the internet, and then you'll be told. So very often I will update the actual repos with the latest and greatest advice that I've gotten after I've made a video. Although I do think the videos are quite nice indeed. But of course, very often the case, especially with SvelteKit, which is still in beta, is that they'll start doing things a bit better themselves. Then there will be a better practice, a more standardized way will emerge. So then the example repos will get updated for you to watch. Cool. So, I think if I look at the mic, maybe it goes a bit too high and it cuts off to protect your ears. Maybe not. I'll have to figure it out later. I'll have to play this video back to myself, as much as I dislike listening to myself talk, which is quite amazing. I like the sound of my own voice, which is why I talk so much, but not when it's coming from a screen, interestingly enough. Hope you find it cool. Right, so did we complete this implementation? Do we want something else? Do we want to do like random buttons on the side that change the input value? Maybe that's something to end, or maybe you want to chat about general things as well. Just need to quickly check the time just to see if I've been streaming for 2 days. But it doesn't look like it's the case. But yeah, formatted inputs. Not too much effort to do. I do think it makes your input more usable if you're working with higher numbers. That said, if you're stressed for time, I would definitely deprioritize this unless your app depends on this looking cool and nice. I do think that if your app is all about a big number that the user can customize, this could make a difference. This would make it look quite professional. The formatting doesn't get out of my way. Important thing, which I would have spotted if we deploy this app and then I can check it on my phone, is that you want to get the iOS keyboard or the Android keyboard pop up instead of text select here. And this won't happen because by default, even though we've said that this is a number input, numbers can have letters like E if you're talking about scientific numbers, scientific notation. So if we want to only allow the keypad numbers, only digits and maybe a dot, because we want people to be able to specify dot, whatever, then we have to specify a pattern here. And the pattern will be the inside of the regex. My GitHub Copilot saying here is every number, which is quite cool. And the star is as many of any number, I guess, as you want. There is actually the slash digit, which would only allow digits for this. And then we can escape the optional dot. Copilot got that one, full marks there, and then any digit afterwards. So this hopefully will allow me to still input any number I want, but not letters. So you have to trust me that now I'm pressing like randomly characters on the keyboard. And now if I press the dot, it actually works. Cool. Hey Leo, what's up? Right, so if we didn't have this, then I would still not be able to input random characters because it's a number input, but I could put in E and do something like that, I guess, which we don't want because iOS will put out like the big keyboard as it currently stands. But the moment you put in the pattern, then it should, well, if I actually save this, then it should not allow you to do that and bring out the correct keyboard there. And we could have had a test for this. Let's see. I haven't actually tested how they've simulated this. So let's say let's not allow the user to type in characters. And we start with the same things, I suppose. Let's copy most of that. Set up user event, get by label text. The input is in the document, and then I'm trying to, well, I'm sleeping, I guess. Let's say 42, and I sleep to press W. Then I would hope that the display value would actually be 42 because it will have trimmed the W in the end, which is true. They've simulated that perfectly. So if I just have slipped here and then press again 1, I guess, then the display value should be 1, which is quite cool. Like safeguards against too much slipping. Neat. Keep slipping on the numbered row of my keyboard. And And this should still happen if I don't have the pattern. But if I didn't have the type of number, then this test would fail and would actually be doing a bit more of a TDD here. So I think we can make a commit here and try to deploy this and see it work in real life. Maybe I can try to get there on my phone and see if it actually brings up the input that I wanted. This didn't actually work, so I will not commit it. Pick button, let's not have that one. We've implemented this route too. And introduce. How loud is my keyboard, by the way? I haven't gotten to like the red clicky switches. I am linear, team linear. Hopefully it's not too annoying. It's still quite a few decibels. So if you've seen other videos, you know that this is set up to deploy via Vercel the moment we raise a PR. So you may see a lot of these examples in code here. Say Magripis, that's my handle. That's Johnny, J for Johnny, and Magripis, my last name. And with Svelte, just a demo app that I have. We may have more demo apps, dedicated demo apps in the future. So let's make a pull request and see if Vercel managed to deploy this. I think with live demos, you'd expect this to like super fail. It's a hidden route, so I have to manually go to tips. It's there. Cool. The question is, if I copy this link and paste it on my phone, I don't have a phone emulator running, and I get there, I do not get the, no, I do. It's not huge, so maybe you can see here amongst my screen. If I focus on the input, I do get the number row and no characters and some other things that I'm not going to use. If we didn't allow for the dot, you would have only gotten the numbers, I suppose. But this should be good enough for us. Yeah, it works even on the phone. Some styling things to figure out, but still not too shabby. So if we go back to the, speaking of autocomplete, I may make, like I think people have made videos on this as well, but starting to use Warp as an editor. And much like VS Code, it will autocomplete like quite a few things for me. And it also has AI commands search, which is quite nuts, to be honest. So if you have a new laptop and you don't remember how do I set up my Git username, you can search like change Git username, and then it will try to find a command that matches and like, oh, do you mean this command? And as it happens, yeah, this is the command that you want. Isn't that neat? At some point, you'll be able to go to the terminal and say, you know, npx make this AI ML perfect app for my idea. And then as engineers, we'll be solving another type of problem, maybe higher level problem, maybe architectural problems. But I do find it quite fun. Anyway, enough with that little tangent. My maybe the thing to finish, if there aren't any other suggestions, is add like a suggested amounts, I guess, section. So if we open again our fancy button, and Let's remove that. No, we actually want it. So why did I get the arrows? Who knows? We'll debug it. We've seen it work in IRL, so it must work. So if we had like a suggested amounts, and we had a few buttons, and I guess we could extract random components out of these ones, but we won't do it quite yet. Called standard. Why am I doing all of this? Is it because I just want this to be like block, to take a space? Probably. So standard, special, simp. Super fan. I don't know what we're tipping and what we're selling here, but it seems appropriate. So I guess we'd want on click of this to make the value be 5. But of course, it needs to be a string. So if I click here, it becomes 5. And if we copy this to 100, it does become, so you can suggest the amounts that you want people to put in. If this was a button essence, maybe it could be here you buy a coffee, here you buy, I don't know, Photoshop license for a month or something, Creative Cloud license for a month. And this one, maybe gaming PC. But yeah, the way Svelte works, and thanks to binding the value there, you don't have to do anything too fancy in here. You don't need to like set value, change state, or dispatch a observable event or whatever, pipe an event. All you need is to reassign this mutable variable, this changeable declaration here. So the moment you say, all right, the value is now going to be 5 or the value is going to be 100, then Svelte will know that this needs to re-render, this needs to render, the input needs to render, and it needs to recalculate this derived value, the formatted value, because this has changed, which makes part of it. And of course, whenever you're copy pasting things, then it's probably a good idea to use a loop. So maybe we can have like a suggested values array, and let's say we want to go for 5, 100, and delete. But actually, we want its suggested value to have like a label, which is a string, and an actual value, which is a string again. Maybe a number. Because if we do make this a number, right, so these things Now that we have these adjusted values, oof, a red warning for an unused variable. I'm like, yes, lint, please, give me a chance. Give me a chance here. Now that we have that, we can do our each thing, which I'll have to look up again. How do you do like a for each in Svelte? It's one of those things. For this is this. And I think you can destructure immediately. So this is exactly what we want. So it's suggested amount. Let's refactor this. We don't want this. Oh, this is an array of things, of course. That's why it wasn't happy. TypeScript was trying to help me. Was helping me. Right, so for its suggested amount, we want a little button. And then in the button, we want to say the label. And then we can even format currency. Oops, it's not React. And this should work the same. I've made the server crash so hard that I needed a manual refresh here. But yeah, I'm not sure. Whoa. Let's not forget that we want the value to equal the amount, not hardcode 5. So the reason I didn't write a test first for this is that I'm probably not gonna keep it. I'm just showing how you can control the value from outside of it. If you wanted, it's my favorite way to turn numbers into strings. So it would be quite similar if you wanted like a plus or minus sign here. You'd have a button with a plus. You could maybe make it a pseudo element again, but probably not. Maybe make it more obvious. But inside it, you'd be looking at the existing value. So you'd be saying value plus whatever your step would be. And speaking of step, you can actually define how much its key press will increase the value. So if you step the step to 5 and you're in here and you press up, it will keep adding 5 pounds here. And you can also set max value. So if someone is trying to give you more than 10K, or if the minimum to make it work through Stripe because of the commission or something is like 1, you can ensure that this will not accept like minus numbers, and you get the native browser validation here as well. Cool. So interestingly, it seems we did something to change how big the input gets. So if the minimum is 1, it's fine. If the maximum is 10K, then it becomes smaller because it thinks that this will take this much space. It's kind of silly if you ask me. But if we make this be W full, then it should be fine in any case. So if you make it that big, you will get this browser validation to tell you that this is too much. You will default back to that one. There are some design tweaks to happen. Maybe it overflows a little bit. I guess the W full fixed the thing where it was going off screen, which is quite neat. We can check to see that these still appear. So this appearance trick that I was mentioning is not correct. Is it display none? Maybe not. So for inputs that have this, it's not, let's Google it. Do not display. Oh, WebKit appearance. They got us. Maybe not. Let's give this guy. Class. Try to use the class and see, does that work? I feel it worked at some point. Did I eat the WebKit on an example? That's why it stopped working. Oh boy. It happens. Oh yeah, I was talking about, you need to manually add this. It's not that auto prefixer will add it for you, so you definitely need to add this. So if you do this, it won't work. And then I left it like this and it didn't work. Oh well, it happens. So with this grand thing, I would style this a bit differently as well. Interestingly, if you add a step, then it won't allow you, even though the spin buttons will add the required amount. So if this is 5, and then it will be adding 5 or however much. It will only accept inputs that are divisible by 5, which is kind of nuts. And divisible by 5 from your starting number. So watch out for that. That's definitely a thing that asks for you to make a mistake for sure, and definitely something to test for if you do want that. So make sure if you add step that you have some tests that cover that you can add random amounts. Personally, I wouldn't use step, and that's the case where I would have some big buttons to say add 5 pounds or add however many pounds you want. I think that's better and more preferable than the current browser behavior. All right, with that, I think we've been streaming for a while, an hour and a half. It flew by for me, but I don't know about you. One day I will start making those apps about Pomodoro timers, because I do think it's more efficient and more fun if you take the breaks. I have suggested the Pomodoro method to others. It has been suggested to me as well, of course. And I do find that lots of people do it, but do not take the breaks. So they use it to actually focus for like at least 25 minutes and then they focus more, which is not the way to do it. It is a way to burn out. Yes, it takes to each their own, but I do find that the breaks make me more efficient. So I will try to implement this at some point, like 25 minutes of focus coding and, maybe glancing at the chat and then 5 dedicated minutes to, sip some coffee. This was delicious. I should have been drinking it more. And interact with the chat, get the energy levels up, get more inspiration up, and then 25 more minutes to code some more. Do 4 of those and maybe call it a stream, call it a day. It depends though. It depends on the subject that we're covering. Not all of the streams need to be long. Not all of the streams need to be short. Let me know what you'd like to see next. I do have some ideas. A lot of them are from comments that I get in the videos as well. Have this little Notion board with various ideas of what to cover next. I have started making a new one that has live stream ideas as well. I didn't change into scenes either for talking to the audience. Oh well, that's the growing pains for sure. So, chat, this is your last chance to interact with me during the live stream. I'll drink one more coffee, fire your questions if you have them. Even if the live stream ends, please feel free to shoot your questions. Hit me up on socials or comment on the videos or whichever. I do read the comments. And I will try to get more content out for you, cover more exciting things. Frontend and tech, it's never been more exciting than now. This will be the case for many, many years, I feel. And we live in the present. Let's get great at tech. Let's get some great jobs. Let's travel around the world and do tech. And sometimes all you need to know is how to do a fancy currency input component, and then you're here. All right, clearly I'm rambling too much. So, to recap, today we did manage to do a currency input component. It looks like... So the thumbnails as well, I may make a video about that. How do you do those fancy thumbnails, Donny? I have had that asked of me. So, what did we do? We created this fancy currency input. We've seen that quite a lot of inputs go the easy way out to have the pound sign or the currency sign, like euro, dollar, whatever your preference is, on the outside of the input. And they almost never actually add the nice commas which make it more readable, or the dot notation. They have the user do all the hard work themselves. But now you can see that we do manage to format it nicely while still make it be quite workable when you're trying to type, because as a user you don't want to actually be adding the commands as you're typing something. You just want to type some simple numbers and then get out. And that's about it. It's still accessible. You can focus on the keyboard with using the keyboard. You can click the label and then it focuses into it. We did start by having the input be inside the label, which is a common trick, but the way we added the placeholder in the end made it so that we didn't want to actually resort to that trick. I think there was an accessibility warning about spans, wanting inputs as direct styles of labels, but I'll have to have a look at that at some point and get back to you. Feel free to find the code as always on my GitHub, link to the video and all of that. I hope you had a lovely time. I definitely enjoyed it and learned a couple of things as well. I'll try to get more content out more consistently as well. Doing live streams will help because I do get a bit obsessive over editing and trying to not waste people's times and not have them follow me around rabbit holes. and not hearing me rabble. So it takes a while. But live streams, it's a bit more chill. You get to see me be a bit more human and take a bit of time implementing things, which is also fun for me. So we'll see how it works out. It's been a pleasure once again. Have a lovely afternoon or evening or morning, depending on where you're watching me from. See you around.